So again, my name is Kathleen Kopp-Benny, and I am the Special Projects Manager for Oxford House just since January, so I'm new on the block, but I'm not new to recovery and services. I am from the Empire State of New York, and thank you. Do we have anyone in here from New York? Yeah. Brenda, I know. Awesome. That's great. So I'm charged with trying to expand the model in New York. And I found my recovery in North Carolina. Is anybody here from Raleigh? Awesome. So I got shipped from New York 21 years ago to Raleigh, and I made my way to an Oxford House, thank God, and it saved my life. So I'm really happy to be standing here in front of you today. So just going to read the description of staying engaged in the recovery community here today. The recovery community covers a vast section of America, from recovering individuals, family members, employers, 12-step groups, EAP programs, and other groups focused on addiction recovery. Oxford House residences engage with these groups to help mobilize the community to support recovery. In recent years, the recovery community has become very active in establishing, promoting, and participating in activities that raise community awareness. Such activities include involvement in marches for recovery and related events, particularly during September, which has become known as Recovery Month. The panelists here will discuss these activities and discuss what have changed during the pandemic and how well it worked and what are the lessons learned. Oxford House residents and alumni also use this involvement to enlist support from the recovery community at the Oxford House community. They also find folks in the recovery community who can help furnish furnishings for new Oxford Houses and introduce new residents to all their neighbors. All of this helps make Oxford Houses and its residents part of the local neighborhood and community. So each panelist will share for roughly 15 minutes, and then at the end, we will open it up for Q&A. So first, we have Stacy Nichols. Stacy moved into her first Oxford House in New Orleans. I said that right. I would like to say New Orleans, but I'm going to say New Orleans in 2014. And she said she lost count of how many houses that she has lived in. She moved from house to assist in stability and expansion for many years. She's opened houses in 4 states, amazing, and currently works in West Virginia and Western Pennsylvania. She has also had the pleasure of working with the central office, Oxford House, and continues to be a game changer for her. In preparation for the panel, I did some research and read an article published a few years ago that I found extremely powerful. It takes a lot of courage to share openly about addiction and recovery, but so very, very critical, using your voice and your story to help shape recovery support services, to reduce stigma. People need to hear from us that we can and do recover. And without further ado, I give you Stacy Nichols.
Good morning, everyone. So I don't think I'm ever going to get used to this. My name is Stacy Nichols. I'm a woman in long-term recovery, and what that means for me is I haven't found it necessary to take a drink or a drug since March 11th of 2019. How many of you here for your first convention? That's just about everybody. That's awesome. I remember my first Oxford House World Convention. It was in 2014 in Portland, Oregon, and it was a pretty amazing convention. That's kind of where my passion for Oxford House started, was at convention. So I'm curious to know how many staff members, future staff members, are sitting in the seats here right now. How many future panelists are sitting in the seats where you all are right now? So how many of you stumbled into an Oxford House, kind of stumbled upon an Oxford House? So I did. I stumbled upon an Oxford House. So the way I was first introduced to Oxford House is I was in a treatment center, and some individuals came into that treatment center and talked about Oxford House. It took me about 3 years after I sat in that presentation to finally find my way into an Oxford House. But what happened is they planted a seed. I wasn't ready to go to Oxford House that day, But 3 years later, I was ready, and I remembered that presentation, and I was able to find Oxford House. So staying engaged in a recovery community looks like a lot of things. First, we got to understand what is the recovery community. The recovery community is very different today from what it was when I first came into Oxford House. When I first came in, the recovery community was 12-step fellowships and treatment, and that was about it. But today, there's, with the awareness and the education just in the last 10 years about multiple pathways of recovery, we're finding out that recovery is like a fingerprint. It is very, very different for each individual. So there's multiple pathways of recovery. So there's not just the 12-step fellowships. There's recovery coalitions. There's a lot of community action agencies and things like that. So one of the things I love the most about Oxford House is that when we are reaching our full potential as a house or a chapter in an area, we are combating stigma, one neighborhood at a time. And that is huge. And we're doing that because people in recovery, we can run our own homes. We can answer our own phones. We can do our own interviews. We pay our own bills, and we do all those things. So how many of you would be surprised to learn that not everybody knows about us? Not everyone knows about Oxford House, right? So that's where staying engaged with the recovery community comes in. When I moved into my first Oxford House in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I was going to my recovery meetings and interacting with the community, it was the Oxford House residents that were chairing the meetings, that were planning the recovery events in the areas. They were the leadership in the recovery community. It was the Oxford houses. They were feeding the homeless under the bridge for Christmas and Thanksgiving. Those were the kind of things that the houses were doing when I came in. And those are the things that got me involved. So I'm gonna pull up my notes. So our duty as Oxford House residents is to make sure that Oxford House has a seat at every table in a community in regards to recovery, housing, and resources for people in recovery from substance use disorder. So what that looks like is whatever recovery fellowship or program you belong to, get involved, having a home group, chairing meetings, sharing your story. Everyone in the recovery community, when I moved into Oxford House, they were the ones speaking at the speaker meetings. And that's what attracted me to Oxford House, So there are some of the agencies that I've been successful with, and I know I'm a staff member now, but I started doing work with coalitions and agencies as a resident. I wasn't an outreach worker when I sat in my first city council meeting or when I sat in my first coalition meeting. So the places that I'm involved in now, there is the Reentry Council in Wheeling, West Virginia. They help individuals leave prison and come in sober living houses, get into treatment, reintegrate into the community. They usually have monthly meetings, and I sit in those meetings. Homeless coalitions. Most people that are suffering from homelessness also suffer with substance use disorder. So getting involved with those coalitions. There's also prevention coalitions and things like that. Excuse me. So in West Virginia, we have quick response teams, and they have those popping up all over the country. So a quick response team, what they do is they respond to overdoses in certain areas. And in many cases, they respond to the overdose before the paramedics do. So what's really cool about them is not only do they respond to an overdose and connect the individual, they revive the individual and connect that individual with the proper level of care or resources that they need, but they will go back to the residents that overdose occurred at, and they will provide counseling and follow-up care for the individuals that were there when the overdose occurred. So as residents, reach out to treatment centers, coalitions, home groups, and things of that nature. One of the things is don't take no for an answer. So if you're trying to get your foot in the door to do a presentation at a treatment center, or you're trying to get your foot in the door to join a board of a coalition, and they're not really wanting to talk to you or they're not calling you back, keep calling them. Keep showing up. So if someone doesn't answer the phone for me when I'm trying to go do a presentation somewhere, they're going to enjoy hearing my voice on their answer machine twice a week. And then if they don't call me back, they're going to hear it 4 times a week. And then eventually they're kind of tired of hearing my voice on their voicemail, so they're going to call me back and they're going to let me do my presentation. Once I get that presentation, I got my foot in the door. Oxford House sells itself. If I can get in and do that presentation, that's all I need to get that agency on board with us. Because we're not just a network of recovery homes, we're a movement. We are a recovery movement. We have, 3,400 houses in the United States right now? We're in 5 countries. There is no housing agency out there that has numbers like that. There's no housing agency out there that has our success rate. So we sell ourselves. So get your foot in the door. Don't take no for an answer. Get that presentation. Get that program director on the phone. Get that chairperson of the coalition on the phone. And then sit in their monthly meetings. Talk about Oxford House. One of the things my regional manager says about me is I'll talk to anybody about Oxford House. I talk to people in the grocery store line about Oxford House. I go to the gas station at the gas pump, I'm talking about Oxford House. It doesn't have to be your outreach worker that is doing the networking in your area. Me as a resident, I probably did more networking as a resident than I've done as an outreach worker. So there's some other agencies, community engagement and community action agencies. So in Clarksburg, West Virginia, there's the Clarksburg Community Action. And what they do is they go around and they pick up trash and they clean up the neighborhoods. Those are some good things that Oxford House residents can be doing because they see you guys out there being of service into the community. So as residents in Oxford House, you are part of that community. So you have to get out there and you have to volunteer in that community. And when we're doing that, we're building a good name for our house, we're building a good name for our chapter, and you're gonna keep your beds filled, and you're gonna have quality recovery in your recovery homes. So, thanks for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Stacy. I was thinking about, how I learned about Oxford House, and it was about the residents coming into the treatment center that I was in and telling me about Oxford House. So I'm truly grateful for those women letting me know that I had a safe place to go after treatment, or I had a choice. So thanks again. So next up, we have Dave Hortzman, a person in long-term recovery since 2015. He's the chair of the World Council and serves as president of the board of directors of Recovery ATK, a recovery community organization in Austin, Texas. I give you Dave Hortzman.
Like Stacy said, you never get used to this. So when you do that introduction, it really made me stop for a minute and think about all this. I am an alumni. I don't work for Oxford House, and a lot of the work that I've done is just through that service and the opportunity to serve. The way you described, like, president of this and board of that, kind of gave me a little bit of chills because I work in construction. I don't even work in the recovery field. Everything that I've done through recovery has been through just complete service to this organization I love that saved my life, to recovery, which saved my life in general, and just how I found my start getting involved with this other organization, Recovery ATX, that she brought up. And I look back, coming up on, or I'm at 7 years later, and it's mind-blowing to me where this all happened, how it happened. It just slowly eased into that. So my early experience in Oxford House, I lived in Houston. Oxford House, Spelman was my first house. and I lived there for 18 months. When I first moved in, I thought, I'm just going to stay in sober living for 3 months, do my time, I'm going to get out of here, and then just go back to real life. I've been in treatment 4 or 5 times. I've been to several different sober living houses. Thankfully, at that point, I knew that I was done. I didn't want to keep going down the path that I was on. But I still had that goal of, I'm going to do my time, I'm going to get out, I'm going to move on with my life, right? I'll still keep going to meetings, I'll still stay involved in recovery. Well, 3.5 years later, I was still in Oxford House, finally moved out and got an apartment, and just recently bought a house a few years ago, which is huge. Had I not built that foundation in my recovery, had I not stayed a little bit longer, like I'm sure you guys remember that meme that was going around, Paul asking you to stay a little longer and go through the manual with the newcomer. Had I not done that, had I rushed out the door, I would not have the foundation that I have. I would not have the experiences I have today. I would not have be on the board of directors for Recovery ATX. I wouldn't be up on this stage, and I would probably be at home just watching TV, and that would be my mundane life, and I probably wouldn't be happy. I get a lot of joy out of the service that I give back, and it all started with Oxford House. So for me, when I left Houston, I actually took a job offer up in Austin and moved there with no plan, no idea what I was going to do, but this job offer popped up and I had to move within 2 weeks. I had nowhere to go, so what did I do? Hey, outreach worker, what's a house in Austin? Find a house for me. So I moved to an Oxford House again. I got to Austin, and at that point I got involved at the state level with Oxford House because I had some experience, and people asked me to. People nominated me to. So I said, okay, I'll do this. What I found by moving to a different community, for any of you who are involved at the state level, how many state officers are in this room? So I'm sure that some of you have gone to different chapters across your state and noticed there's a little bit of a difference in how chapters operate. That's that beautiful thing of autonomy, right? And it's not that one is always the right or only way to do things, right? That's the beauty of autonomy. And the same can be said for recovery in general, right? We heard about multiple pathways to recovery. That is a very important thing that people are starting to wake up to and recognize, that there's not just one only path. And when I moved to Austin, I was used to in Houston this kind of the old school island style of AA meetings over here, NA meetings over here, some young people meetings here, and then there was everybody else, and you didn't really hear about those meetings. When I got to Austin, I had the great experience to see this community that had thrived on people going to different styles of recovery meetings. Like those people would be hopping from AA to NA to CA to SMART to Dharma across the board. And a lot of different events and activities and community groups and ways for people to get involved. And it was a very meshed community. And that was very huge for me to see that, because that's just what I was used to before. So at that time, I had very limited knowledge of any resources in Austin. I didn't know. People would say, hey, my friend needs to get into treatment. Where should they go? I didn't know anything. I had lived in Houston for so long, I didn't have a clue. And it was almost, it hurt me. And I didn't know these resources. I didn't know these things. I'm, been in Oxford House at this point for a couple of years. I'm in a state position. I can't give the resources that I wanted. And it kind of ate me up a little bit, but I'm really grateful that just a little bit of work and not letting that get to me and getting involved and just going to events, volunteering places. Over time, I've built connections that allowed me to be able to provide those resources. How I ended up being on the board of Recovery ATX is actually, it was me and 4 other Oxford House residents at the time. All of us are now alumni, all really doing great in life. We decided that we wanted to get together and save this space in East Austin that was a space where meetings were held and that Oxford House loved to use for events. We would always have events up there. And they approached us and said, hey, we're going to close this place down. Does Oxford House want to take over the lease? And we're like, well, how Oxford House works, this whole democratic thing, and every dime that goes in and goes out, there needs to be a lot of accountability and votes. So it just didn't fit as a way to have, run a recovery club. So a few of us personally decided it was so important to the Oxford House community that we served in, that we're like, let's get together and let's form our own nonprofit. And we want to keep the space alive as a recovery space and a recovery, for meetings and for events. We invited another board member another person who started their own nonprofit to be an advisory board member to help us, because we did not have a clue what we were doing. We're just a bunch of residents who are like, we love this space, let's keep it going. So a gentleman named Joseph Sanchez, who was the founder and board president for Recovery ATX at the time, he proposed the idea of how about we merge, because they already have 501c3 and they had some capital, and we had a space and they didn't, and we had a passionate group of people. So we merged, and that's how I ended up in this recovery community organization world with peer services and all that. Totally by accident. So I got involved with that, and I've been on the board of directors for Recovery ATX for about 4 years, and now serve as the board president. And we still have a very active group of people. Probably about half of our board of directors are Oxford House alumni. We've actually also hired, we got our first grant in 2020, and then subsequently got second and third and fourth grants. And now we have a staff of 10 with 6 recovery coaches, and we are doing peer services daily for a lot of people across Central Texas. We just this last week, on Saturday, I'm still exhausted from it. We had our biggest recovery event that we've ever had in Austin. It was Recovery in the Park. It's our 6th annual, and this year we were backed by the state of Texas as the official Big Texas Rally event, Rally for Recovery event for Texas. And we had 74 community partners and sponsors and roughly 1,500 participants that showed up for the Stay in the Park together, and it was really a beautiful thing. Oxford House and us together, we've always kept that relationship strong with Oxford House. Because for me, like a lot of people think of Oxford House as just, it's sober living. That's what it is. Oxford House is considered peer services because we support each other as peers in our houses. We don't have house managers. We don't have licensed counselors on staff that, it's us working together to a common goal. And I relate a lot of that to my work with Recovery ATX. I've learned so much from Oxford House I've passed on to Recovery ATX and vice versa. And that continues, and it continues to grow and blossom. And our relationships that we continue to develop with Oxford House and also with all these other community organizations across Austin, we get to continue to share resources with each other and build each other up and grow each other as organizations. And again, keep in mind, I'm just a guy who works in construction who moved into an Oxford House who wanted to stay for 3 months. And all I did was I just stayed plugged in. I stayed involved. I talked to people. I volunteered wherever I could. And I went to events. And that's all I did. It really wasn't anything more. I took some chances along the way. I didn't do anything extraordinary or big. I know how to deal with grants and contracts now. I couldn't tell you anything about that before. Still confuses me quite a bit. But, it's just, if you stay involved and you stay engaged and you keep doing this thing, Oxford House is a great starting place, great platform, great roof over your head while you continue to find your recovery and what that looks like for you in your path. So I really encourage you to stick around a little longer, build that foundation. And next thing you know, you might be up here doing this and getting to keep giving back, and I will never forget this for the rest of my life. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. he talked about a foundation, and I mentioned that I was in an Oxford House in Raleigh, and after 18 months, I moved back to New York, and there were no Oxford Houses and there were no recovery centers. And I remember being in the Camel Club, and we had a lot of fun there. There were all kinds of meetings and karaoke, and I said, one day, we need a recovery center in my area. And I went back to school, and I worked at the Rockland Council and engaged in the recovery community, and it was, you know, a dream of mine to have a recovery community center in my area. And we opened in 2019, and the name of it was Foundations, because I was taught, yeah, it's amazing what can happen. My next goal is to get Oxford Houses in that community. So staying engaged, staying connected, you know, it's a blessing if you're in an area that you have, you know, chapters and a lot of people to support you along the way. So happy to be back here and doing this work. So next up, we have Hamilton Barton. Hamilton is an Oxford House alumni who's instrumental in starting the Oxford House Alumni Association and is the CEO at Pay It Forward in San Antonio, Texas. Pay It Forward provides a critical link between treatment and long-term recovery through supportive, sober living, allowing individuals to heal. And in preparation for this, I heard him, I'm going to quote him saying that moving out of an Oxford House is not the end, it is just the beginning, and that's absolutely the truth. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to carry that with me, and I give you Hamilton Barton.
Good morning, everybody. Oh. I'm gonna echo our two previous speakers and say it doesn't ever get easier. I have the opportunity to speak with lots of different people and promoting the mission of Pay It Forward with donors and state agencies and things like that, and those seem to be a little bit easier. And I think the reason is because I'm so emotionally invested in you guys, right? The Oxford House network, the peer support, the family that I got from the house that I lived in changed my life, right? I wouldn't be here today had I not had the opportunity to live in an Oxford House. I had tried to get sober from the first time I walked into a meeting on my own in March of 1989. My clean date is January 19th of 2014. So that was 20 plus years, right? The only thing I hadn't tried before was Oxford House. So I owe a deep debt of gratitude to this organization and the people that continue to live in it and thrive in it and grow in it. And I'm super proud of everybody here in this room today. Thank you for being here for me. So I want to share a couple things that I've heard over the last couple days since I've been here. I've heard some words that are just different than the words that used to surround me right before I got here. Some of the words that I've heard since yesterday are purpose, joy, home, responsibility, hope, accountability, grace, love, family, kindness, mission, and service. Right? I mean, I don't know where each of y'all came from, but in the end, before I got to Oxford House, I came from the streets. You know, I didn't hear any of those words out there, right? So for the fact that that's the words that surround us today is amazing, right? It's a miracle. So when I got to Oxford House, I had been in treatment again, and I ran into a guy at a meeting that I used to run the streets with, and he said, "Man, when you get out of treatment, you got to come live at my Oxford House." And I was like, what is the Oxford House? And he said, no, man, it's really cool. It's a bunch of guys. We all live together. It's a super nice house. We go to work. We go to meetings. We chase chicks. It's great. And I said, I'm in, right? The problem was I got high again, right? I couldn't go back. I had burned every bridge that I had, right? I had two choices. I had the streets, or I had call him, right? And I called him and I said, Gary, I messed up, man. I don't know what to do. And he said, come on. And they gave me an interview and I moved in. That day changed my life. I didn't know it then, but it was going to set me on a course of experiences that I had always wanted to have. I just never knew how, right? I decided really early on that I was going to buy into this deal. I mean, I didn't have anything to lose, you know. And I would tell people all the time, I'm not bucking the system, right? If there's a suggestion or a guideline or a guardrail or a rule, I am going to follow it, right? I'd been in the house about 2 months, and I went to my first chapter meeting. I still was, you know, $150, you know, face was still kind of drawn in. I still had sores on my arms, and, you know, I just looked terrible. But this group of people decided that I was going to be their chapter chair. And I thought, what are they thinking, right? And I was scared to death. And someone said, hey, you probably ought to read the manual. And I did. Now, I had gotten a job at a law firm as a file clerk, right? I could put paper in a file, but that also meant that I had access to like all these printers and, you know, computers and all that kind of stuff. I didn't know much about them, but I could print out a bunch of stuff. So I made real fancy manuals for me and all my housemates and everything. And I read the manual, and I understood. At least I started to understand how big this Oxford House thing was, right? How impactful it was, how meaningful it was, and I was starting to see how successful the movement was. So the first real meaningful experience that I had as chapter chair was there was a house in San Antonio that was struggling, right? There were 3 members in the house. They didn't have any money in the bank. All their bills were due. And so they called chapter to come help. And so we went over there. So 4 of us went to the house. More people showed up than actually lived in the house. And these 3 guys were scared to death, right? I walked in, we sat down, they started the meeting, and these 3 guys were so scared, they never looked up from their books as we were going through the meeting, right? You know, they were going over last meeting's secretary minutes, they were going over the treasurer's report, they were doing the comptroller's report, and finally I said, hey, look, guys, stop, take a breath. Okay, we're here to help you. You're not in trouble, right? We're here to figure this out. So we went through the meeting. We got down. One of the guys who showed up decided he was going to move in as a core member, and he was going to pay an entire month in advance. We came up with a plan for each of the other residents to find somebody else to move into the house, and they were each going to pay this much to make sure within the next couple of weeks they could pay their rent and pay their bills, right? So at the end of that meeting, we had some guys that went from being terrified to hugging and crying and relieved, right? And I knew at that moment that this is what it was all about, right? This is what it's about. It's about community. It's about a group of us getting together and helping the other people walk through situations that they don't know how to get through themselves, right? Does anybody know what a stakeholder is? Anybody ever hear stakeholders? Yeah? A stakeholder is an individual or group that has an interest in the decisions or activity of others, right? So I didn't realize this, but when I moved into an Oxford house, each Oxford house has a bunch of stakeholders, right? And just a few, right? Other houses, right? That's a big one. Recovery meetings and clubs, treatment centers, courts and probation officers, doctors' offices, clinics and hospitals, landlords, utility companies, cable companies, water companies, employers, and families are all stakeholders, right? They rely on us to follow the model, right? Because when we follow the model, good things happen. You know, I would go to houses sometimes and the houses would be such a mess, right? Because the people in the house were just struggling. They were doing the absolute best that they could, but then they would bring in someone to interview, to talk, you know, to see about moving into the house. And the people were so uncomfortable because the house wasn't operating like it was supposed to. Even if they got voted in, they didn't move in, right? And so as Oxford House resident, when I was one, I knew that I had a responsibility to make sure that my house did better than that, right? My house was pretty good when I got there. And because of that, because of the people who were there already, when they interviewed me, I felt comfortable moving in, and I knew that I was going to be okay. I think the same goes with our recovery meetings, right? One of our biggest stakeholders. I wouldn't be here without the opportunity to start to form those relationships with the people that I have over the years in recovery meetings. You know, I'm one of those guys that I go to AA, but I also go to NA, right? I was a garden variety alcoholic until I picked up methamphetamine, you know. I are that. I am both. I have had sponsors in both fellowships, right? Our relationships with the recovery community is vital, right? Events, big time events, like we were talking about earlier, recovery rallies. Those are where we're going to find our friends, right? Those are where we're going to find our people. San Antonio is having one this weekend. Our agency is there. I am not. I am here with you guys. So once we've started to build a solid foundation in the recovery community and begin to build solid relationships, it is imperative to continue to participate in the newcomers' opportunities for success because they depend on it. And one of my favorite quotes is, "You will miss the blessing if you are not prepared to receive it when it presents itself." So our personal growth that we have the opportunity to experience through our engagement with Oxford House will set us off and send us into the fourth dimension that we hear about so often. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And yeah, everyone is in the recovery community. This disease affects all aspects of community. So you mentioned recovery rallies, and I had the opportunity to organize probably 15 or 16 recovery rallies in my community. I was basically just charged with it, and I said, how do I do that? And I went on to the Faces and Voices of Recovery website, and I heard this woman speaking about Recovery Month, and 21 years later, I am standing here introducing her. And if you think that things don't happen as you stick around and stay engaged, it's just amazing, really, what can happen. So Ms. Yvette Torres is currently a freelance consultant, most recently engaged in the National Latino Behavioral Health Association and NADAC. She retired from the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration in December of 2017, where she served since the fall of 1997. She oversaw the CSAT team responsible for generating and disseminating substance abuse treatment information to SAMHSA's mission-related constituents. She developed national communication strategies. I have one. I'm almost finished. I'm almost finished. National strategies, including the observance of National Recovery Month, celebrated each September, where we can celebrate recovery. So I'm done. I give you Yvette Torres.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Kathleen, and the members of the panel. Eloquent. First, I want to introduce someone who was visionary, incredibly knowledgeable, and a true leader in the field of recovery and addiction medicine, Dr. Wesley Clark, who made really Recovery Month possible. Because it was under his guidance and leadership that we were able to do what we were able to do. And we did quite a bit during his tenure, quite a bit. A lot of you are from that era. And you know that we were reaching 83 million households through the Road to Recovery cable television shows. We had about 1,100 or 1,200 events throughout the country every year. And so why am I telling you that? Because at the time, the 1-800-662-HELP line was getting hundreds of thousands of calls for people who needed help to get help. And they were doing so because they were getting all these messages from public service announcements, they were getting messages from rallies during September, and they saw people in recovery, including, I saw quite a number of Oxford House banners in Utah, in different places. Every time I went, Oxford House said present, and you had an incredible contingent during Recovery Month events. And so now it's a little bit different. Now the onus is on you to be able to continue to put together events. As Kathleen was saying, it does make a difference. And it makes a difference because as part of your recovery, the goal, I think, should be not only to safeguard your own recovery, but to really try and help others come into recovery as well. And it has been mentioned, you've gotten a little bit of a glimpse of a comprehensive framework, because I think that your area of staying engaged in the recovery community is number one in your household. Because you need to be in harmony, you need to be talking to each other, and you need to be engaged. And I know that sounds rudimentary and it sounds Pollyannish, but a house divided cannot produce a good outcome. Am I wrong? No, right? So first things first, one works at the local level in your home and get together to talk about what's going on in the broader community that you are part of. Get together and see what's going on with your neighbor. Paul said this, Mr. Malloy said this all the time. Get to know your neighbors, and if they don't want you there, mow their lawn. Volunteer, mow their lawn, right? And there's a lot to be said by that, because the NIMBY, which is not in my backyard, is alive and well. It hasn't gone away, and I don't think, with people worrying about their property values, that it'll ever go away. So that's number one. Work at your home level. Get together, talk about what's going on in your neighborhood. Now, second, work at the community level. I always said in the many, many years that I've been here at the Oxford House World Convention that you need to invite those neighbors. You guys have barbecues, for God's sake. You have events that you can pull together, even an evening of inviting, people from your community to see how well that Oxford House is operating, to see how well you're doing. You become that example to that community. So invite the mayor, invite the city council, invite anyone who will listen to you. Because that's what Paul Malloy did. He knocked on every single door that he could, and he talked and talked and talked until he was blue in the face. So that's what we have to continue to do, but do it at your community level. There's also the state level. What is going on? I'm sure that Oxford House Central can tell you if there are problems with some legislation or laws or things that are going on, right? That people have to get engaged in. Find out. Become a messenger for the things that have to change in order for Oxford's houses to expand and to exist, or exist and then expand. Because at any given point, boy, and if we think that things do not change in this country, all you have to do is take a look at the last 4 years to see how things have changed. So, state level, and I know it's the big P, the politics can sound a little off-putting to some of you and say, I don't want to get involved in politics. Well, you're not really taking sides. This is not about taking sides. There are people in recovery that are independent, Republican, Democrat, or nothing. But the fact of the matter is that our job on behalf of Oxford House is to keep those Oxford House running well, and thriving so that everybody else who comes after you get independent, after you get your apartment, after you engage in a new activity that is keeping you visible, vocal. What was it, Marianne Frangulis? Is there anybody you know from Massachusetts here? No one. Well, Marianne Frangulis is the head of MORE, Massachusetts Organization for Addiction and Recovery. And during one of the Recovery Month meetings that we used to have, she says, you know, in recovery, we have to be visible, we have to be vocal, and we have to be valuable. And that, boy, that is the biggest tagline that anybody could have thought of in terms of people in recovery. Visible, vocal, and valuable. So to the extent that you are able to do it, to the extent that you have the time to do it, and to the extent that you have the motivation to do it, you need to look at how you can work together at your home level, you know, at each house level, at the community level, at the state. And if some of you want to deal with national issues as well, find out how you can engage in that, because that's terribly important as well. There's national legislation all the time coming up related to recovery issues, related to addiction treatment, related to the block grant and everything else that engages our field. And it is important to hear from you, because you are one of those people. Before, we used to have meetings and include people, and they were extremely dynamic at a national level because we didn't exclude anyone. We didn't say, oh, this is by invitation only. We didn't do that. Now you see a lot of meetings that are taking place nationally for organizations in recovery. Says, oh, by invitation only. Heck, we had people from harm reduction groups before it was even SAMHSA's allowed to have people that were harm reduction groups to come together. So take a look at the framework of how you can become engaged and how far you want to take it, because it is important. It is important for you. It is important for you in your recovery to give back. And it is highly, highly important for people in your community to be able to look at you as an example. Each and every single one of you is an example for other individuals that need to get into recovery to say, by God, if you did it, and 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 look at the story of how you got your recovery, I can do it. And then more people can take advantage of being sober in an Oxford house and having the benefit of you helping them lead the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to take this with me. Visible, vocal, and valuable. And that's really, really true. So thank you so much. Thank you. So now it's almost that time to open up for questions. Does anybody have any questions? Are you going to go around with a mic? Okay, the mic is coming. Here comes the mic. Right here.
Hi, my name's John. I'm from New Jersey.
Hey, John.
I really appreciate all you guys' personal and professional experiences. It was very valuable to hear that. My question is for Dave, right? Is that your name? You, give me a second. You mentioned the recovery in the park, and it was the 6th annual event with 1,500 plus people, with backing from the state, and I think you said over 70 different sponsors. In my area, we lack a lot with engagement in the community. And I'm really curious to hear about some obstacles that maybe you faced on event number 1, because I imagine event number 1 had nowhere near 1,500 plus people. And to get to event 6 was a lot of progression and steady growth and, people seeing the outcome and the results from that. So I'm just curious as to any obstacles you can share that you had to overcome, whether reserving space, getting approval from town, county, township, having sponsors be open to it so I can start that in my area.
All right, now it's on. So yeah, the event that I brought up, he had brought up the event that he's missing this weekend. It's a series of events that Texas does called the Big Texas Rally. And in previous years, they would rotate cities. And this year, that backing that we were talking about, so they decided to, instead of doing that they were going to have 5 different cities across Texas do it at the same time. So that's what I was talking about. So he has experience with that. Now, my first year, when I got on Recovery ATX, I can't speak for their first year with the event because they had already started that event. But I will say this year was the first one we've done in the last 3 years because of COVID. So, and we had a lot of new faces on our board, and I'd never actually helped plan and participate in the event. So this year was my first year actually doing that. And we had a lot of those obstacles. We had parks that we used to use in the past that completely changed. They built playgrounds, and the space was no longer what we needed, access to electricity, et cetera. The biggest thing that we did was we took framework from what other organizations had done and found their successes and their failures and their struggles and built off of that. Again, engaging with that community, like using each other's strengths to work together. And also, one of the big things we do with that event is we ask for those different partners and sponsors to bring their own activity to the event so that they can engage with participants as well. And that's what we like about our event that makes it unique is we're not the ones having to do all the activities. So, they'll do face painting, giant Jenga, cornhole, axe throwing, whatever. They're all bringing those activities, which helps a lot, makes it less work for us, and a lot more options for people. So the more people that come, the more people that sponsor, the more activities there are and less work for us. So that's one big thing that I would say, without taking up too much time, that really helped and benefited us.
I just wanted to add to that. Faces and Voices of Recovery actually has a toolkit for Recovery Month events. That's what I did. You know, they tell you step by step who to invite, where to have it. It's right there for you. Welcome.
My name is Will, and I'm from New Orleans. We recently had a situation come up where we got a notice on our front door where the city had posted a violation that we had altered the house in such a way that it was not in compliant. It was out of code. Basically, we made some rooms, bedrooms that were used to be a living room and a dining room. And next to it, next to the little check mark where they said that we were in violation of the code, they wrote Oxford House, which to me was kind of a swift kick in the gut, saying that, you know, we don't want addicts living next door to us. We kind of know who did it, but we don't know. Can you offer any, other than praying for them, other than, you know, the people who evidently turned us in, you know, that they get anything and everything that they want? I thought about making them bread. I thought about, you know, I did go and I mowed the lady's lawn next door to us. You know, I asked her, you know, I said, can I mow that little space in between our houses that, you know, that we share? She said yes. We do talk to our neighbors on the other side. They have a nice young man that we told him what we're doing. We told him why we were there. Is there anything else, any other tools, any other ideas that we can do to just let them know that we're okay? You know, we may be addicts, we may be former addicts, but is there anything else that maybe you can offer?
Yeah, so when it comes to neighbors, the first thing you guys can do is, one, don't violate any codes. Okay, that's the first thing. Don't keep the grass cut. Keep the yard looking nice. Keep the property up, because that's the first thing neighbors really care about is their property value and the atmosphere in their neighborhood. So make sure you guys are keeping that atmosphere up. Y'all are part of that community, so take care of the property. Don't violate any codes. And if there is a disagreement or something like that, then you know, one, make sure you're not doing it anymore. But two, you don't want to be too pushy either. You know, just be good neighbors, and sometimes the best solution is just to let some time go by. Let some time go by while you're being good neighbors. And then maybe have a little event at the house, like cook a dinner or have a barbecue and invite them over to the home and let them see how clean and nice your house is, and that you guys are just people like them who want to live there and are keeping up their property and want to make the neighborhood beautiful.
Ask my question.
Thank you. We have time for one quick question. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll make it as quick as I can. It's been a privilege coming from West Virginia. So I started out in Texas. I got clean in Texas, and then I transferred to Oxford House in West Virginia. So I'm going to try to not go geographical on this. But if you had to choose one in particular, you know, that, because sometimes it's like drawing straws, right? So you don't know what's going to particularly work in that particular recovery community. But if you had to pick one thing out, what would it be? And I'm gonna go with Barton, Stacy, or Dave.
Pick one thing as in what?
That you think that is the most important as far as engaging in that recovery community.
Be present, be a part of, participate. That's the number one thing. Be a part of the community, be in the meetings, be at the events, participate and be seen.
Stay in your process.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I want to mention something before we adjourn. I went to the Oxford House website, and there's a rating in there that says that Oxford House is a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And I suspect, I started reading what people were writing, and some of the people that got kicked out of homes were very upset. So you guys, whoever's here and everybody in your house, you need to get into that website and say how much you love Oxford House. Hello.
Amen. Yes.
Because you need to have that 5.0 or else. I mean, there's no going around that. Because I said, oh, you know, this is a disgruntled, and if only the disgruntled people are putting their voice in there, guess what everybody else is going to think? I know different, and I know why that happened, but your average Jane or Joe doesn't. So you need to get into that website, the Oxford House website, and say 5 stars, 5 stars.
That's right.
5 stars.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So 5 stars and 10,000 houses. And remember, visible, vocal, and valuable. Have a great rest of the conference. Thank you for your attention today. Thank you.